Hello, Namaste everyone. I'm Aarti from Ayudh, thanking all our online viewers for joining in. Ayudh is a group of young dynamic youth dedicated to perpetuate natural harmony, social justice, and personal empowerment. Our vision and mission is inspired by the humanitarian leader Sri Mata Amritandamayi Devi, lovingly known as Amma. Today, we are going to talk about a very important health issue which is related to each and every individual, irrespective of our age, gender, or ethnicity. Many people throughout the world have went through extremely tough times during the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID has taught us many lessons, and hopefully, humanity will learn to imbibe these. While the COVID-19 pandemic is hopefully coming to an end, there are other dangers lurking around the corner. And today, we are here to discuss one of those dangers, which is called antimicrobial resistance, in short, AMR. Every year, 18 to 24 November is being observed as Antimicrobial Awareness Week. The 2021 theme is Spread Awareness, Stop Resistance. This calls upon all stakeholders, such as policymakers, healthcare providers, and the general public, to be antimicrobial awareness champions and to spread the message. Ayudh India, in partnership with Amrita School of Biotechnology, is also participating with full zeal to fight against antimicrobial resistance. Ayudh India is proud to bring to you today a panel discussion about AMR, with an aim to spread awareness regarding AMR and what can be done to avert the looming danger. Before we begin the panel discussion, I request Mokshamrita Chaitanya ji, who's Amma's disciple as well as one of the national coordinators for Ayudh India, to kindly say a few words.
Namaste everyone. Thank you, Aarti. It is indeed a matter of great satisfaction that Amrita School of Biotechnology and Ayudh India have jointly organized this panel discussion with esteemed doctors from different parts of India to address this very important issue regarding how to stop antimicrobial resistance. As part of Amrita family, just like other Amrita institutions, Ayudh India as well as other Ayudh centers around the world are committed to spread awareness about AMR so that we can stop AMR. On behalf of National Ayudh Coordination Committee, I would urge all Ayudh members to be active participants in this AMR awareness campaign. Let us all be AMR warriors and be a part of this fight against AMR. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you, Mokshamrita Chaitanya ji. And now, moving on to the panel discussion. In this regard, we have some esteemed doctors on our panel here today, and it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sanjeev Singh. Welcome, Doctor. Dr. Sanjeev currently serves as Medical Superintendent at Amrita School of Medicine, Kochi. Next on our panel, we have Dr. M. Gauri, MBBS, DNB, OBG. Namaste, ma'am, and welcome.
Namaste, everyone.
We also have Dr. Vikas Nandakishore, Amrita Kripa Hospital.
Namaskar.
Namaskar, sir. Next on our panel is Dr. Sunil B, MD Pediatrics, DNB, Neonatology, Professor of Pediatrics and Neonatologist. Thank you, sir, for gracing us with your presence.
Namaste.
Next, we have Dr. Priya Nair, MBBS, MD in Internal Medicine, DM Gastro, Fellowship in Therapeutic Endoscopy, Associate Professor of Gastroenterology at Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences. Thank you, Dr. Priya, for taking time out and being here today. And to moderate this panel today, we have Dr. Geeta, Dean, School of Sciences at Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham and Professor, Amrita School of Biotechnology. Thank you, ma'am, for taking time out and for moderating this panel.
I'm sure.
Over to you, Dr. Geeta.
Om Amriteshwari Namaha. Thank you, Aarti, for that introduction, and a very warm welcome to everyone. As Aarti mentioned, the main purpose of this panel discussion is simply to understand the phenomenon of what antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, is. What is this all about? And to become aware of this growing global health crisis, which is looming on the horizon. This interactive session is actually, as Arati mentioned, a part of the International Symposium, ALARM 2021, which is conducted by the School of Biotechnology in conjunction with WHO's annual World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, which is starting actually from today. The event has also received a tremendous boost through the participation of our Ayud centers, not only in India, but across Europe and US as well. For this exciting discussion, we have a panel of experts who can draw upon their experience and educate us with important information that is very pertinent to us in our day-to-day lives. Because armed with this knowledge, each one of us has an important role to play in helping to eliminate this threat. I have great pleasure in welcoming to this session Dr. M. Gauri, obstetrician and gynecologist, Dr. Vikas Modi, general surgeon, Dr. Sunil B., pediatrician and neonatologist, Dr. Priya Nair, gastroenterologist, and Dr. Sanjeev Singh, medical superintendent, Amrita Hospital. The first question that comes up is, what are antimicrobials? I mean, are they different from antibiotics? Maybe we can ask Dr. Gauri to give her opinion on what antimicrobials are all about. Dr. Gauri?
Yes, madam. Thank you, madam. Microbes are microorganisms which we cannot see through our eyes and see only through microscopes. And some examples of microbes are bacteria, fungi, viruses, and parasites. So antimicrobials are the medicines which are used to treat these infections, either in humans or animals or in plants too. So there are 4 types of antimicrobials. The main ones are the antibiotics, which are used to treat bacterial infections, say like cold, cough, or urinary infections, tuberculosis, etc. The next comes the antivirals. Antivirals are used to treat viral infections, say like chickenpox, HIV, or AIDS. And the third one is the antifungal medications, which are used to treat fungal infections like candidiasis or thrush. And the fourth type of antimicrobial are the antiparasitic agents, which are used to treat common diseases like malaria, toxoplasmosis, etc.
Thank you.
About the...
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gauri. That clears up things a lot. Dr. Sanjeev, would like to ask you what exactly this antimicrobial resistance is. What is AMR? Why is this such a big deal? Why should we all be aware of this phenomenon? Can you kind of share your thoughts with us regarding this?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Dr. Geeta, and congratulations for organizing such a critical event. Antimicrobial resistance, as Dr. Gauri mentioned, it is a stream of antibiotics, antifungals, antivirals, which are there. Antimicrobial resistance is almost considered equivalent to climate change. And as we know that like global warming, there would be a 1 degree elevation with every 15 to 20 years, and that is going to impact heavily. And that is why fossil fuels on the grounds are sort to stay there and use clean energy. Similarly, antimicrobial resistance has also taken a lot of importance only because if we don't treat these bacterial or viral infections appropriately, these agents are not going to work. Now, whenever, if you like a very common antibiotic would be a penicillin or an ampicillin, which is a household name. When we use it, and if there is a resistant case, like a patient who has pneumonia, a lung infection, these antibiotic, the penicillin which gets in, will not have any impact. So either they prevent antibiotic from entering, so there are no receptors to work at the lung tissue levels or the bronchial levels, or they are immediately pumped out because there are various other mechanisms, or it inactivates penicillins or ampicillins. So it's not going to have that kind of an impact. Or if it has to work on a lung tissue, it modifies the target itself. So what impact we used to see for looking at this sepsis management is not seen at all, or it completely avoids the target. So there are multiple mechanisms, either horizontally or vertically. There is transmission which is happening, and which leads to an ineffective use of antimicrobial. And this happens because we are either overusing it, we are misusing it, or we are underusing antimicrobials. The impact, what you said, is going to be very, very heavy. So it is estimated, yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask you, sorry to interrupt you, but so am I right in saying that if this goes unchecked, then, if you have a small prick or, a scratch or something, which we take for granted today, tomorrow, if we have all the known disease-causing agents or pathogens becoming resistant to all the known antibiotics, then we'll quickly be hurtled into this post-antibiotic era, or an era before the discovery of antibiotics, where even a small scratch, say by a thorn or a pin, can potentially lead to, to bacterial infection and septicemia, and even maybe death, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is the fear which is going to happen, and it may take years or many decades to reach that. But the difficult problems like solid organ transplantation,
Surgeries, yes,
surgical. So if we don't do it well, it would be just 3 to 5 years that we would see an end of transplantation, hemato-oncology.
right.
So, and surgery may not be possible. So it leads to more death. For an example, if there are a population of 32 lakhs in Ernakulam, there is close to 1/5 of this population are dying as we speak right now because of antimicrobial. So it's that big, and it's going to go bigger. And because of that, each citizen is going to pay more for their treatment.
Right.
And simple antibiotic is not going to work. They are going to go to a higher antibiotic.
Right.
The toxicity is going to be more.
Yes.
The morbidity is going to be more. So it's going to be taking a very, very dangerous turn. And that is why the event which you are organizing and the WHO's Awareness Week is so very important.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev. That was very detailed. Also, since you mentioned numbers, I've also read that 10 to 20 years from now, the people who are dying because we don't have proper antibiotics to treat because of antimicrobial resistance would far exceed the people dying from diabetes and cancer combined, right? I mean, I think I've read those numbers. I've come across that. But when we talk about antimicrobial resistance, a very relevant question that comes to mind is, are children affected by antimicrobial resistance? Is there a specific age group among the children that are affected by this phenomenon of AMR? Are there any differences in symptoms or outcomes of AMR in children versus adults? So to get some answers to these questions, let's ask Dr. Sunil, our resident expert and practicing pediatrician, for his expert advice. Dr. Sunil?
Thank you, madam, for our invitation. As we know that majority may think that only adults will be affected. More problem is in kids. We know it's children means from 0 to 18 years. After 18 years, we tell it's adults actually. More common age group what we have seen is 0 to 5 years. The reason why it is 0 to 5 years. Majority of the common infection, day-to-day practice, what we see is common cold, cough, loose motion or diarrhea. All these are common in first 5 years because of the immunity is less. After 5 to 10 years, the incidence of infections in the kids are less. Therefore, we start to use more antibiotics, or whether it's misuse or overuse in these kids, so they will have more antimicrobial resistance problems in these 0 to 5 years. And we should know how can these children are different from adults and why they are different. We know that when the newborn is born at birth, it is having antibodies from the mother.
Right.
Probably these antibodies will stay up to 9 months. which will protect the baby from any acquiring infections.
Right.
Once after 9 months, the antibodies level comes down, the infections start to very common in kids compared to adults. And moreover, the immune system means where the antibodies are produced are immature. They are not up to the level compared to the adults. Therefore, common bacterial, fungal, as Gauri Madam was telling, all the infections can occur to the kids.
Right.
And more important, the kids are not being educated about hygiene, which they should hand wash, they should not keep it mouth. It's a very common mouthing and teething is very common kids.
Yes.
Therefore, if you touch something, they'll have cross infections or more.
Right.
This behavioral pattern is also very different in the kids.
Right. Right.
These are the reasons where kids are more affected compared to adults, and the difference between the children and the adults in micro.
So
area.
if a child gets, I think ear infections, for instance, very common among children. So what is your advice to parents of little kids who have these infections? Do you have any advice as to what they can do to help prevent this overall phenomenon?
Ear infections are common when there is a cough and cold. This is because there is a connection between the throat and the ear. So this is a flu season. Also, when they're feeding, mother is feeding, they should feed in a proper position. The milk goes to the milk ear, it causes infection. Wherever there is a water or a wetness, infection increases. This is a way how to prevent. If at all they get an infection, so that they should not start immediately the antibiotic. They should visit a doctor. I think they should take an advice from a doctor, whether it's a viral or a bacterial.
Right. So that's pretty very, very helpful. So everybody, please take note. That's a very simple and elegant solution to try and prevent ear infections. And Amma, the Chancellor of Amrita University, she's also expressed a lot of concern at how parents are so quick to kind of give antibiotics to children, and therefore, the next generation of kids, even when they are in utero, because of this excessive use of antibiotics, have this propensity to have developed antimicrobial resistance. So this is very, very serious. And since we are talking about children, a very relevant and pertinent, not to mention important question that comes to mind is about pregnancy and AMR. Are antimicrobials safe in pregnancy? If a pregnant mother-to-be has to take antibiotics during pregnancy, does it affect the fetus? How so? Can AMR be passed on from mother to child? As an obstetrician and gynecologist, Dr. Gauri, what are your recommendations and your expert advice for these questions?
Yes, ma'am. See, most of the things present in the mother's blood goes to the fetus, crossing the placental barrier. So it may be, in a normal like nutrition, oxygenation, like that. Even whatever medicine a mother takes, most of them crosses the placental barrier and reaches the fetus. So we have to be very, very, very careful in prescribing any medicine in pregnancy for that sake, especially antimicrobials. And as Dr. Sunil has already mentioned, most of the infections which are seen commonly, which is the same which will happen in a pregnant mother also, can be treated without antimicrobials. And since antimicrobials, most of them crosses the placental barrier and reaches the fetus, it is preferable to avoid antimicrobial usage, especially in the first 3 months of pregnancy.
Okay,
because
that's a good point to remember, yes.
That is the first trimester where the various organs of the baby are forming. Between 5 to 12 weeks of pregnancy is the time. That is what is called as an embryogenic period. The organs of the babies form. At that point of time, any medication or any, say, toxic substances, anything reaches the fetus, definitely congenital malformations happen in the baby. That is one thing. Beyond 13 weeks, the formation is over. The organ formations are almost over. Only further growth happens. But even then, the growth also can become stagnant because of antimicrobials reaching the fetus. Like, say, if I say the most safe antimicrobial to be used in pregnancy is going to be penicillin and penicillin derivatives, like cephalosporins. And most of the other medications definitely have an impact on the fetus. Say, they can even damage the ear and causing deafness. Sometimes the bone growth is retarded. It can cause discoloration of the teeth. So there are so many impacts.
So suppose a mother, an expecting mother, has an infection and she, for some reason, doesn't respond to penicillin, which is your,
Correct.
that's what you're advising. What are the other options or alternatives available to her?
Yes. The common infections what we encounter in pregnancy will be, as usual, like a common cold or a normal viral fever,
Right.
or sometimes diarrhea. These are the common infections which we encounter,
Right.
which can be most of the times managed without using any antimicrobials. The most important infection which needs an antimicrobial in pregnancy will be, and which is common, is going to be a urinary tract infection.
Right. Right.
So definitely when a pregnant lady comes to me with the symptom of urinary infection, definitely if the patient is not toxic, very sick, I would still prefer to do a urine culture and sensitivity test, wait for the sensitivity report, and then choose a safe antibiotic in pregnancy and give.
Excellent.
So first choice is penicillin. In case that organism which is growing is going to be resistant to penicillin group of drugs, the nitrofurantoin is the next preferable option, which is quite safe in pregnancy, except very close to term, we prefer to avoid nitrofurantoin. Otherwise, yes, till almost the last 2 weeks of pregnancy, we can use nitrofurantoin safely. So it is very much essential to choose a very safe drug in pregnancy, and also only if it is absolutely essential.
Right. Let's underline that point. So that's very, very helpful. Thank you, Dr. Gauri. Dr. Vikas, in your day-to-day practice as a surgeon, can you shed some light on what is the right way to take antibiotics? How do you avoid antibiotic resistance in recurrent infections like diabetic foot infections or abscesses? Also, can you throw some light on what are the guidelines for, once a person has undergone operation, what are the guidelines for judicious use of antibiotics in pre as well as post-operative periods? Dr. Vikas?
Thank you very much. First of all, first question you asked how the antibiotic should be taken. So this word antibiotic is introduced to the community by the doctor only, or either a pharmacist may give sometimes if the patient directly goes to the pharmacist. So doctor has to very judicially use this antibiotic, which is an important weapon to fight against the infections.
Right.
So how the antibiotic has to be taken is as it is advised by a doctor. So doctor should be judiciously advising the antibiotic. For the prescribed number of days, it should be taken. And also we should advise the patient that you should not take when the similar symptoms recur again. You have to come back to the doctor and take his advice.
Basically, not too much, not too little, just the right dosage that is prescribed by your doctor for the right duration that is prescribed by your physician.
And regarding this surgically treatable conditions, there are some conditions like abscess, which even if you give antibiotics, however strong higher antibiotic you give, it will not be getting treated. So if the abscess has to be drained. So many times the treatment goes wrong by some practitioners, or the patient takes a self-medication out of some knowledge, or doing Google or some other way.
Right. Self-medications, yeah.
So that doesn't treat it. So it has to be surgically operated, and then only the treatment is done. As far
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but India is known to be the diabetic capital of the world. So and when you have diabetes, I don't know if this is correct, but my understanding is that when you take antibiotics, somehow that affects or moderates or modulates your blood sugar levels also when you're on antibiotics. So do you have any advice for diabetics who may have infections?
Diabetics who have recurrent food infections, their food infection takes a longer time to heal. But till that wound heals, it is not advisable to keep giving them antibiotics, because many a times when patients come to me with diabetic foot infections, they will be getting treated by local practitioners, and by the time they come here, when I do the pus culture sensitivity, all the medicines will be resistant. And miraculously, we treat them without antibiotics sometimes. Because only the wound toileting is required very well. That is, the wound should be washed very well. It should be kept clean. and that is the way with diabetic control.
So in other
That's
words, you basically just clean the wound and let our body's natural immune defense systems take over. You don't have to use antibiotics. So that's an important point to remember.
the open wound, whichever is there, there will be microbes sitting on it.
Right.
You need to pump antibiotics to the patient, because
Right.
any wound, even if you take a culture, there will be bacteria, because it's
Right.
open wound. There is
Right.
no skin for it.
Yeah.
So you don't need to keep giving antibiotics. You just need to give a good dressing, keep it clean, keep the sugars under control, and that's it. That solves the problem of antibiotic resistance in these kind of patients.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vikas. And, we all agree that almost a lot of the antibiotics are actually taken orally. And so they get to our gut first or our stomach. So how do these antibiotics actually affect our digestive system, or how does it affect our gut health or health of our gut? Because we all know that there are a lot, millions of microbes, which is known as a microbiome, which is the collective population of all these microbes in our stomach or in our digestive system that help a lot and that take a lot of, that help us in digestion and various processes of our body. I mean, to draw an analogy, I would say, like when you have cancer and you take a chemotherapeutic agent, it's going to kill the cancerous cells as well as the healthy cells. So similarly, what we're talking about right now all along is do not overuse antibiotics. But still, I would say that when you take the antibiotic, the first part of the body that is actually encountering is our gut. So how does this affect the gut health? Let's ask Dr. Priya, our GI expert from Amrita Hospital, on what her thoughts are on these very pertinent questions. Dr. Priya?
Thank you, Dr. Geeta. Yeah, you brought up a very important topic because we already discussed what the meaning of a microbe is. It's bacteria, viruses, fungi, protozoa, so many different kinds of organisms.
Right.
And people have always been trained to view them as bad. But the thing is that we don't recognize that actually there are a larger number of these whether they are bacteria or viruses, that are actually beneficial to us, much more than the number that are disease causing and pathogenic. In
Right.
fact, these collections of microbes, like you call the microbiota, that's what it's called, it is now considered as the largest organ of the body.
Yes.
And a large majority of our immunity, in fact, 20% of our digestion actually happens because of these bacteria. So when we talk about how, and Dr. Gauri had mentioned about the harms of taking antibiotics when the mother is pregnant, especially the first 3 months, and
Right.
she was describing that to us. In fact, this particular organ, this microbiome, is also being generated, it's being developed at that point of time in the child's body. Their microbiome development starts in utero. So when you give them antibiotics, anyone from a child, the mother while pregnant, a child, all the way through adulthood and old age, any antibiotic given is actually affecting this most important organ of our body, which now studies have shown affects everything in our body.
Can I ask a doubt here? So I was fascinated because you said that the microbiome of the fetus in utero starts developing when it's still inside of the mom, but it's a sterile environment. So how does it actually, what is the genesis? Where does it start of this microbiome? How does it develop in the fetus?
So that's a really good question. So we call things as sterile. And why do we call something sterile? We call it sterile because when you take a sample and put it in a petri dish, it cannot be cultured.
Right.
But we have, as many studies have shown, if you try to culture or find out what is in our microbiome, it's not culturable.
No, it's not.
You have
Most
to
of them
look
are
at
not.
genetics, you have to look at
Right.
DNA samples in order to actually identify what is it in our intestine, what actually is our microbiome.
In fact, majority of them cannot be sequenced. Cannot be cultured.
They cannot be cultured. So it's actually a misconception, or as science is constantly developing, we previously thought that no bacteria will reach the child through the mother, but that is being proven wrong. These beneficial bacteria actually can traverse the placenta or the blood fetus barrier, and they can come in. Although, like Dr. Sunil had said at one point, this whole thing of children putting, things in their mouth, a large amount of the microbiome is actually formed through childhood, not necessarily in utero. But the effects of antibiotics can begin to affect a living being all the way from inside the uterus.
Right.
So, and since this microbiome is so important, I mean, a significant amount of our immunity, we're talking about, what is the harms of giving a person antibiotics? It's a chain reaction, because when a person's immunity comes down, they need more antibiotics, which further destroys the microbiome. And it's just a vicious cycle. So the effects of antimicrobial resistance, and one last point in this regard, is that not only does it kill these good bacteria, but it also changes their own genetic makeup, so that you have a microbiome that is antibiotic resistant.
You have a dysbiosis in the microbiome.
Exactly. Even the good guys start to turn evil. And that creates havoc when it comes to, and we see this in our clinical practice. It's something that if you really start to think about how and why we are getting more patients with much more severe infections, you start to realize the depth, like Dr. Sanjeev said, how bad the scenario is only comes out when you look at how much it's affecting a human being. It's not just killing the bacteria in the urine, it's infecting you all over.
Fascinating. So we understand how deep and how important this whole phenomenon is. And in that light, Dr. Priya, I should also ask you, is it why, a couple of questions, is it why people are encouraged to take probiotics? So maybe we can spend a minute or two talking about probiotics. Why should probiotics be taken if you actually have to take antibiotics, one? And two, do these help in restoring your microbiome? And when should probiotics be taken? Should they be taken along with the antibiotic, after the antibiotic, before, etc.?
That's a great question. Probiotics are something that though a lot of guidelines talk about it, the use is still not at all anywhere near adequate in clinical practice. Probiotics are basically, like we talked about before, we haven't really been able to culture or develop probably 95% of the actual microbiome in human beings. But that being said, certain good bacteria, we have been able to get healthy cultures. And these cultures are put into a tablet, and it's literally colloquially called a yogurt tablet, because initially yogurt, the good bacteria in yogurt were what was considered to be helpful after taking an antibiotic.
So I think Amma has talked a lot about it too.
Yes. Actually, Amma tells any single person that comes and says, I had to take antibiotics, she immediately goes and says, make sure you take the yogurt tablet, because you require that. Anyway, so probiotics, previously it was thought that it just kind of helps to restore balance, but now a lot of studies have come out showing that it actually helps to prevent antibiotic resistance to some extent. The degree is still being studied. But when you immediately start bombarding the patient with probiotics along with the antibiotics, because this is about the intestine. Now, you may be taking an antibiotic for urinary infection, and it will reach the urinary tract, it will kill those bacteria, but then the residue stays in the intestine, and gradually all the bacteria that traverse the intestinal tract are continuously being affected, and that gradual mutation into an antibiotic resistant bacteria continues for a much longer period. So by taking the probiotics, you are immediately trying to flush out those bacteria that are being affected by the antibiotics, and hence you reduce, we call them AMR or antimicrobial resistant bacteria shedders, are people who don't take probiotics but have a lot of antibiotics, because all the bacteria they release into the water system by going to the toilet, that is basically increasing the pool of antimicrobial resistant bacteria. So as you made a very valid point, when do you give them? They need to be given along with antibiotics, number one. They need to be continued for at least a week or 10 days after completing the antibiotics, which is
Okay.
very important. And the
Okay.
other thing, a practical point with regards to when you actually take it, they mustn't be taken 2 hours before or after the actual antibiotic tablet.
I see. Okay.
Because when you take it along with the antibiotic, you're basically mixing inside the
Right.
stomach both the bacteria and antibiotic.
Right,
You
right.
allow the antibiotic to be absorbed into the body, and later on in the day, at least the 2-hour gap, you give probiotics.
Perfect. So
Also, always take refrigerated probiotics. That's something that is very important for people to know. The probiotics that are not refrigerated, they tend to have very poor effect. They don't really
Okay.
make much of a difference.
Very important and very pertinent points. One more thing. So have you seen this affect your patients in your day-to-day practice? Is there some interesting case study or something that you can share with us, like how taking antibiotics actually, made them more prone or more susceptible? Anything that you want to share?
There's two quick points I'll make without taking too much time. But one is this concept that whenever you have diarrhea, you quickly take an antibiotic because you must have taken some E. coli, or that's people know some of these buzzwords. But
Right.
actually, we find in clinical practice that there are more than 50% of our diarrhea patients are actually coming because they don't have enough probiotics. So we find that initially treating the patient with probiotics before trying to jump to an antibiotic actually takes care of a significant number of patients that come with diarrhea. And that was a very interesting clinical finding that we initially thought maybe we're a city in Cochin, it's urbanized, people are more, there's a higher education level. But then we did a study where we looked at this even in the primary healthcare centers, where we said,
Wow.
first try to give the probiotics, see if they respond. And if they don't, or if they have signs of florid infection like fever and all of that, fine, antibiotics. And we found that a significant, more than 50% of the patients never even required antibiotics.
Wow.
So that's a significant change in the clinical scenario.
Yes.
Then one aspect that some of the other doctors were talking about, cultures, that
Right.
you need to give an antibiotic once you get a proper culture. So as a gastroenterologist, I deal with a lot of patients with liver disease, and they, like diabetics, a very similar set of issues. They have low immunity.
Right.
So one of the problems with cultures is that it takes you 2 to 3 days to get a culture.
Right.
And
Right.
these patients come in with infection. And the saddest part is that the infections are often from their own intestine.
So let me just ask you a question here, and sorry to interrupt you. So
No.
when someone comes in with an infection, would it be prudent to, because as you said, it takes a couple of days for you to culture, and that's why most of the doctors give broad spectrum antibiotics, because they want to deal with the infection and control it. And that's why right now we are trying to identify, using research, quick and cost effective means of identifying it in a few hours versus a few days. So having said that, while that research is going on, doctors are, they want to treat the infection. What if you just give probiotics and wait for the culture to kind of, that 1 or 2 days for the actual identification of the culture, and then start the antibiotics? Is that something doable, practical?
Well, that's okay if it's like a diarrhea or dysentery or a purely intestine related issue. But when you're talking about bloodstream infections, when you're talking about infections that are not in an area, probiotics don't get absorbed. They're only inside the intestine. So respiratory infections, serious infections like meningitis, or infections in the brain, or intrauterine infections, you need to give a broad spectrum antibiotic, and it has to be an antibiotic. There's no question of probiotics. The points that we do need to be careful of doing is we need to de-escalate, because what happens a lot of times is we continue giving the broad spectrum, and after a culture comes, we don't de-escalate. But that is again more of medical protocol issues. But what we do see in the outpatient or inpatient is that when patients come and we give them, like a liver disease patient comes, they have bloodstream infection, and we give them what we consider to be the broad spectrum antibiotic, they sometimes don't even survive until the culture report comes.
Wow.
And when the culture report comes, you have all these bacteria that are resistant to every single one of the antibiotics that you've tested. So it just goes to show that we are already in a really bad situation.
It's true.
And unless we begin to act now to reduce the
Yes.
whatever the newer, more strong antibiotics are, and the interesting part is that sometimes bacteria will be resistant to all the broad spectrum, but they'll be sensitive to the particular antibiotic that we no longer use because it's quote unquote outdated. So
And-
these bacteria keep changing. They keep
Right,
changing, and we have to change accordingly.
And I think smart doctors, there's also, I didn't want to get too technical, but you can also have combinatorial treatments where, if you have some resistance, using a combination of antibiotics can also sensitize.
Certainly.
Yeah. So, thank you so much, Dr. Priya. That was fascinating and very interesting and very, very important points to keep in mind for our audience. Dr. Sanjeev is the medical superintendent of Amrita Hospitals, and as we all know, Amrita Hospitals has received a lot of accolades in regulating and maintaining good antibiotic stewardship, which is basically a very fancy way of saying what is the right way to use antibiotics. So, Dr. Sanjeev, can you give us some tips on the do's and don'ts of antibiotic use? How best can we, as individual citizens, help towards combating this antimicrobial resistance? How does it impact the common public? Dr. Sanjeev?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Geeta. I think that's a very, very relevant question, especially for the common public. It is important even for the healthcare professionals because the prescriptions have to be appropriate. So overall, there is a 5R mnemonic, which is very easy to remember.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is extremely important first is to have right indication.
Okay.
Now, antibiotics are generally taken as wonder drug and magic bullets. So even if you have any kind of fever, you think it's infection. So it is treated or taken as an anti-inflammatory. You have a lot of viral, and Dr. Priya, Dr. Gauri, Dr. Sunil all mentioned that there are viral infections, but antibiotics are being given for viral treatment. So if the indications have to be appropriate, I think that's one. And there are many areas where antibiotics should never be prescribed, like most of the diarrhea and vomiting, which I think every panelist have alluded to. Many of these bronchiolitis and rhinitis and upper respiratory tract infections where it is not required, skin soft tissue infections where it is not required. So there are some immediate areas where it is mostly viral in nature and we should not jump into antibiotics. So right indication is one. Second, if you need to give it as a right dose, because
so let me interrupt you one. So let's just drive this point home. Any kind of viral influenza, fever, don't rush off and take an antibiotic. It's not going to do anything for you.
Absolutely, because it's going to do more harm. Generally, what happens is every patient thinks that it's my illness. I am not feeling well this time, and maybe I need to pump in, and that is okay. But you maybe it would be okay for you, but you are going to do more harm for the community because it would be all there in your hands. It would be there in your body. It would be there as a fecal-oral transmission, and then there is a ripple effect which happens because of this resistance which gets developed. So it's a public health agenda. So coming back to right indication, then right dose is important. Right frequency is also very critical. Right duration, because generally what happens is we are very fancy. We get fancied with the terms 7 days and 10 days. So every time we always prescribe antibiotic, which is either 7 days, 10 days, and 14 days, and we don't know where this duration has come in from.
There's no 5 days. I've heard a lot of 5 days also.
Yeah, 5 days because many a times we feel 48 to 72 hours is where the bug will grow. And most of the time it is the 5th day where you do a confirmation whether there is a growth on. So that's how 5-day empirical treatment is recommended. So most of these duration has no signs. So we need to be very, very critically observing what is the right duration, and that is again important, plus the frequency. So if we have the right indication, right dose, right duration, right frequency, and right indication, I think that would be just appropriate for every public to consume this information and also apply it. And whenever we see, well, like our pharmacy college student who had gone for a home health visit, and they realized when they spoke to a lot of people who had these prescriptions and how they are taking antibiotics, and we realized that many of them, they don't follow these prescriptions.
Right.
And they don't take it correctly. Maybe it's not prescribed. It is stopped much before because the clinical symptoms improved. So they didn't follow a particular course. And that is how antibiotic resistance gets enormous in nature and very, very difficult to treat.
Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you so much. So many important, pertinent points that we can easily incorporate in our day-to-day lives to, from our own little angle, help fight this whole phenomenon of antimicrobial resistance. Having heard from all our experts, let's open this discussion to our audience. Arati, do we have any questions from the audience? Anyone from the audience?
Yes, ma'am. We do. Yes, ma'am. We do have a few questions, AQ and the esteemed panel to address. So I'm just reading it out. The first question is from Preeti from Delhi. So Preeti writes, is AMR a communicable disease? Can it spread? So that is her question.
So the answer is yes, because it is a transmissible disease, and as I said, it would be like earlier it was supposed to be just infection, then it became nosocomial, then hospital acquired, now it is called as healthcare associated infection. So healthcare, you and I and the surfaces are responsible. So these antimicrobial resistance is transmissible. So it goes from human being to animal to food and to the environment and come back to the human being. And that is why just seeing that my treatment for this particular illness is good enough, I think everybody needs to be responsible citizen and look at this as a public health agenda and be in unison towards improving everybody's health.
So, Arati, before you go ahead with the next, I actually had a question, listening to the question that you asked, Arati, which is, can it be reversed? In other words, obviously, if you have this AMR, obviously it is in the bacteria that is in our gut that's developing resistance, etc. Can it be reversed, and is it also genetic? In other words, and maybe Dr. Gauri can shed some light on this. Is it something that can be from one generation to another passed on, in other words?
Yes, definitely. Because even without using antimicrobials, the microbes slowly change their DNA pattern. Their genes keep changing over a period of time. So
Right.
if you leave it for time, it takes a long time for these microbes to become antimicrobial resistance.
Right.
But because of injudicious use of antibiotics or antimicrobials, this process speeds up. This process quite speeds up. So these microbes change your genetic pattern totally.
Right.
So this definitely, once it changes, it cannot be reverted back to normal.
Right.
It is going to definitely pass on to generations.
Right.
So as Amma also clearly says, when we even think of using water or food or whatever, oxygen, when we breathe, we should think of our next generation.
Right.
So use less so that we are saving it for our next generation. Same thing I think applies even for antimicrobials.
Very true. And as I think it was Dr. Sanjeev who talked about climate change, at least that is reversible if you really take care. I mean, this is far more of a problem because, it doesn't seem as of today to be that easily reversible also. Sorry, Arati, please go ahead. I just thought came to my mind. Please go ahead with the next question.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev, and thank you, Dr. Gauri and Geeta ma'am for throwing light on this topic. The next question is from Manoranjan from Cochin. He writes, does this arise only in a hospital setting or only in a clinical setting, or are there any other factors responsible for AMR?
I think I can take up this question.
Yep.
Almost 70% of the times this antimicrobial resistant problem surfaces from a non-human usage of antimicrobials. Because we are seeing microbials being used to prevent or treat infection in animal husbandry, poultries, aquacultures, not only for prevention and treatment of diseases, also as a growth promotion, because they want these animals, because they use them as food later on. So they want growth promotion of animals and fishes. So that becomes a major source of antimicrobial resistance. And rest of the things, as humans, as we are using, and I think already Dr. Sanjeev has clearly explained, through environment, through the water. In fact, in the municipal water waste treatment plants, when they analyze those wastewater, contain a lot of microbes who have already developed resistance to antimicrobials, probably because of mixing of water from the healthcare sectors, or even say, for example, if I use an antibiotic and definitely it gets excreted in the urine, that gets mixed up with the sewage water. So not only human usage, it is also the other sources like farms and animals and even plants. They use some, I've heard, I have seen in the news that injection streptomycin is being used to treat fire blight disease in apple trees, pear trees, such things. So I think overall, everybody is contributing to this antimicrobial resistance, which we have to be very careful about and try to revert back soon to adequate practices.
Thank you, Dr. Gauri. That was quite enlightening for all of us.
Can I bring in one more point here?
Yes, Dr. Sanjay.
Yeah, basically,
Yes,
I
sir.
think every antibiotic or antimicrobial also has an expiry date. And if it is not sort of disposed properly, it goes either into the landfill or it goes into the wastewater. And there is again a cycle of antimicrobial resistance which gets started. So every bit of responsible citizenship is important. It's critical, where we need to play that role. So Dr. Gauri, you did mention about animal health, fisheries, but environment health and our role towards disposing all these medicines appropriately is also very, very critical. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanjeev. Like you rightly said, I think looking at sustainability and looking at how disposal of antibiotics happens is also very critical. Moving on to the next question that is coming in live. The next question is by Devasmita from Kolkata. So she says, in layman's terms, what changes in policies can bring about to control the AMR, for instance? Can we control over-the-counter antibiotics access, etc.? So what kind of policy changes is what she's looking at, which can control AMR?
So there are various things which we need to sort of,
Yes, Dr. Sanjay, I think you can continue.
Okay. So there are various things which we need to sort of entertain here. One, it would be at the national level that there are significant policies of clinical guidelines which are there. So we use appropriate and rational antibiotics or antimicrobials. Second, it is important to educate people. So like you are organizing this particular symposium, which is fantastically done, because then the public will get aware of right consumption and right use of antibiotics. Third, it is important that we also reach out to all sectors, just not human health, but animal health and fisheries and environmental health, because everybody does contribute to the antimicrobial resistance. It is important also to just not keep this information to us. So information, education, and communication at all levels is also critical. It is also important that we continue to research on repurposing antibiotic or looking at newer antibiotic to be developed and use the combination which Dr. Geeta did mention, which would be more effective. So it would be a combination, a collaborative, a co-designing of all of it would be what would be important as a good policy. And keeping all these key opinion leaders, reaching out to them so that they play a very important role to educate. And it is, as we have seen with the mortality and morbidity increasing and the cost of care increasing, it will be important that it becomes every citizen's role.
I think that one other aspect, like you mentioned, though, the policies on the national, international levels are extremely important. I think it is also very important that each individual, at the end of the day, change always has to start from below up. And a lot of the times we see that antibiotic usage doesn't actually get to the level of the doctor at all. So unless that awareness that it isn't just a magic pill, but it also can have significant serious effects if not used with discrimination, that from the level of the people, you know, that go to run to the pharmacy, the pharmacist becomes the doctor, you know, the local panchayat member becomes the doctor, everybody else becomes the doctor. But how important it is, and there's also often a level of mistrust in doctors because of all kinds of media things. So restoring that awareness and confidence and understanding that you need to have a proper prescription, that you know the antibiotic is not the last solution for all problems, that it has to start from below up as well.
Right, Dr. Priya. So so as of now, you mean to say without prescriptions, antibiotics can be prescribed over the counter, right? So if there is a law amendment and if antibiotics can also be put into a category of drugs that cannot be taken without a proper prescription, will that really help? Or is that even a possibility? I'm just asking from a layman's perspective.
I'm sure it will go a long way to help, but I think it also needs to be both ways. Giving the awareness to people, because you know there's a law and there's always exceptions to the law, and you know everybody goes around, there's always loopholes found, and I think that it needs to be attacked on both ways.
So we have been dealing with this for almost 7-8 years within the state of Kerala. Whenever we talk about antimicrobial at any forum, whether it is human, animal health, they all want a regulation. And believe me, government is not going to come up with regulation. They don't want regulatory practices because they want popular policies. They don't want restrictive policies. So they're not going to come up with any regulations. Now, within this, H1 classification is already there for antibiotics. So whenever you prescribe, there needs to be 2 prescriptions. But then, unfortunately, the drug control department have very limited resources. There is a regulation. There is a red strip policy of antibiotics which the government have released. But who's going to monitor? Because drug controller office doesn't have enough drug inspectors to monitor all this. So that's rightly Dr. Priya mentioned, it's individual's job, and that is where your program which you are doing for the common public is extremely, extremely critical. We cannot be depending only that government need to regulate, which is not going to happen. That is where each one of you and I need to be a responsible citizen.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev. That was very enlightening. And thank you, Dr. Priya. That were very important inputs that you added. Our next question that's coming in is from Subhanshi from Lucknow. So Subhanshi says, do you think COVID-19 has contributed to the problem of AMR? Are there any lessons from recent COVID treatment protocols which the common public should be concerned with?
COVID period has seen a lot of medications being given without any proper studies in also. So it was a really bad time for the antimicrobial resistance to rise. So still a lot of investigations are going on regarding the proper treatment of COVID. We had a very tough time for last 2 years. All kind of medications were given for COVID, even antibiotics, everything was being given. So it has added to the rise of this antimicrobial resistance.
And
We all
from
saw this black fungus
Mhm.
news going all over the
Right.
place. And initially, it was thought that a lot of the COVID-19 patients, it was because they were given steroids, and possibly the steroids further reduced immunity. But I know in Amrita Hospital, we saw a lot of patients who they were never started on the steroid, and they had been started on multiple antibiotics for whatever medical indication that there may have been at the time. But I feel that is an example to show how clearly, antibiotic use had gone haywire all over the country with COVID-19. Like Dr. Sanjeev mentioned, that for every viral pneumonia, viral influenza attack, antibiotics are often given indiscriminately. And that was one example where you can just see how that may not have been bacteria that was the problem in that particular instance, but indiscriminate use of a particular medication of antibiotics caused this particular fungus to go haywire, and there were so many deaths all over, to the point where that particular antifungal agent was not available anywhere in the entire country. So yes, I think COVID-19 certainly was a period of indiscriminate medication use, be it antibiotics or whatever, and that certainly will have a negative effect that we have to now work even harder to overcome.
And one more thing, what I feel is we have got two waves, I think, COVID-1 and COVID-2. What people were thinking at COVID-1, of course, we were not knowing what we were treating. We thought as a pneumonia, we started a lot of antibiotics. One good part when it comes to second wave, what lesson we learned, it is not an infection, it's an inflammation. It is not a virus or a bacteria, so that we should hit with antibiotics. That we should learn that. Earlier was azithromycin was they thought we should use. Later we came to know that it's only inflammation. To control the inflammation, depending upon required only, we should start anti-steroids. Otherwise, we should not do. There's a lesson from the second wave that it's only inflammation, treated inflammation, not as an infection. By doing this, we would have avoided a lot of antibiotics. In turn, antimicrobial resistance can be avoided.
I'll just add up here. Look what we had done during COVID. There is close to 3.4 crore of cases. Almost 81% of them had mild infection. All of them had azithromycin. All of them had doxycycline. So these are two antibiotics given for antiviral treatment, which is required as COVID-19. Many of them, almost all of them, also had ivermectin. Antihelminthic, not required. Prophylactically, a lot of people got hydroxychloroquine, not required at all. Now, there was an antiviral which was actually required for an antiviral, but the panic was so high that it was even given for mild cases, which was recommended for moderate and severe cases. So in totality, I think what we did is, because of panic, there was a complete mismanagement, there was an overuse, misuse, or underuse of lot. And because of that, there is a small collaborative which is there within Indian Council of Medical Research, and this group of 56 hospitals have reported a very high secondary bacterial infections. So coming back to what program you're organizing today, for common public, it is extremely, extremely important that we need to seek support. If there is a symptomatic management, we need to restrict ourselves to symptomatic management. Antibiotic is not a magic bullet, and it's not a wonder drug. Second, I think you need to go and seek help from the medical professional and not from the prescriptions which keeps rotating at various forums, and then you consume because you are anxious and there is a peer pressure.
Right. Those are very, very, very informative inputs, Dr. Sanjeev, and from Dr. Sunil and Dr. Priya. Thank you so much. So this concludes the question answer session. Over to you, Dr. Geeta. Thank you.
Thank you, Arati. To wrap this discussion, let's now ask each one of our experts to give some salient takeaways that we can all remember to practice in our unified fight against AMR? We can start with Dr. Sunil and go down. All of you can give some salient takeaways from your perspective.
From the pediatrician perspective, the most important what we feel, we should not pressurize a doctor. A doctor should not get panic because of the kids to prescribe an antibiotic. It should be at the last resort. We should start only if it's needed. And also, most important advice to the parents, what I tell is, whenever there is an infection, for example, practical point is both are working, which is very common in this situation.
Right.
They send to playgroup, so that when the baby is infection, they should not send to the playgroup because they should spread to other kids.
Right.
The baby is on antibiotic, they should complete the antibiotics, then they should send.
Right.
Because it should be the other kids. It's very important, very common in kids. Parents should take note of it.
Very important. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sunil. And Dr. Gauri?
By 2050, if we are not tackling this problem of antimicrobial resistance, we are going to see almost 100 million deaths per year globally. This is what WHO has projected.
Yes.
So each one of us, especially the doctors, the patients, and the community as a whole, and the government has to take the entire responsibility to tackle this problem as soon as possible.
Right.
And also that we are in a post-antibiotic era. We don't have any more antibiotics to treat. If these present antibiotics are also going to become resistant.
Right.
So we have to understand this. And for all the doctors, there is a National Center for Disease Control of India, which many of us does not come to know about. And they have in 2016 released one national treatment guidelines for antimicrobial usage in infectious diseases. So I think all the doctors should be aware of this. It is very nicely explained what diseases need antimicrobials, which antimicrobial, what dosage, all details are there in that. So doctors have to really go through that and be judicious in practicing while prescribing antimicrobials. And of course, we also have to know what is the national action plan, which has been devised by the government of India to tackle this antimicrobial resistance. And we all have to cooperate with the government to achieve success in this way.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gauri. Dr. Vikas?
So this all antimicrobial resistance in the hospitals, it is being happening under the garb of empirical therapy. So that empirical thing has to be it should be de-escalated as far as possible. That is very important. And it was a very informative session for me also. Thank you very much. The right use of antibiotic is the answer for the entire session.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vikas. Dr. Priya?
I think I would add that the probiotic use is something that everybody should keep in mind.
Yes.
Protocols on how to use them, that will certainly help. And the other thing, like Dr. Sanjeev also mentioned in his mnemonic, is that one of the important things is for all diarrheal diseases, antibiotics are certainly not the answer. And antibiotics should only be given if there is adequate clinical indication. I think a lot of the other points were already mentioned.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Priya. Dr. Sanjeev, would you like to add something to wrap up the session?
Yeah, I think it should be taken as our own. We need to be an accountable citizen, just like climate change and global warming. Antimicrobial resistance is extremely critical for us. Each one of us needs to sort of contribute. We cannot wait for government to bring in legislation or policy. As Dr. Priya mentioned, individually, we need to sort of contribute. And the rational prescription and rational consumption, it is not about just the doctor giving the right prescription, but many of them, they just go to the over-the-counter and or the leftover medicine from their relatives they take. So rational consumption is also extremely important. So plus the infection control, so right hand washing and taking care of the patients appropriately will also be key, because if we do wash our hands appropriately, the load or the burden for using antibiotics will again be less. So I need, my point is, be a responsible and an accountable citizen.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev. Well, this was a very informative as well as interesting discussion. And I'm sure that having listened to all of you, our audience certainly has a much better idea of AMR, the problems it poses to us, and what we as individuals can do to help fight it. I thank each and every one of you, Dr. Gauri, Dr. Vikas, Dr. Sanjeev, Dr. Sunil, Dr. Priya, for having taken time off from your very busy and hectic schedules to provide us with a very comprehensive, well-rounded overview of antimicrobial resistance. We have some very important information that Arati will share with all of you. So back to Arati. Arati?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Geeta. You've been a wonderful moderator, and without you, this session wouldn't have been complete. I would like to share a few points. As part of the World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, Amrita School of Biotechnology, part of Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham, will be hosting multiple events over 3 days. These events are in line with the ones suggested by World Health Organization. On 19th and 20th November 2021, there will be a colloquium where different national and international scientists working in the area of AMR will speak to our audience. At the end of the colloquium, we will have exciting competitions for both undergraduate and postgraduate students from all disciplines to participate. In addition to this, there is a challenge where you can take part to increase awareness of AMR and decrease resistance. Let us remember that each one of us are AMR warriors. So send in your pictures and selfies in action. And for more information, please log in to amrita.edu/alarm. Ayuth and Amrita School of Biotechnology is also organizing a cycle rally against AMR on 21st November 2021. So get in touch with your local Ayuth coordinators for more details. Let us spread awareness in our family, in our community, and stop resistance as early as possible. Let us all be AMR warriors. Last but not the least, thanking all our viewers for being with us through this session. Please follow, subscribe on our YouTube channel so that you can be notified for any upcoming sessions. Till then, signing off, Team Ayuth, Namaste.